Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the New World 4 release and some features I'd want to see them implement in the future. Some of these are simple UI gripes and concerns, while others are more quality of life improvements. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of video game content here, from reviews to New World coverage and a lot more. So if you're interested, feel free to check out more content on the channel, and let's jump into my 5 things I'd want to see in New World. Let's start first with the UI changes I would like to see in the game. First off, being able to track what is on your compass a little better. And currently, if you look at any of your practical skills, you can see the items that can be tracked when you hit a certain level, whether that's a certain type of ore, or animal, or plant, or really whatever, depending on your skill level, even down to some of the rare trees and plants. In theory, this does make it a lot easier to track some of these things, especially higher rarity materials. However, there's no current way to seem to filter what you're tracking. This presents a really big problem when you have a lot of high-level skills in fairly common areas, especially if there are a lot of animals or plant and harvesting spawns around you. It adds a lot of extra clutter to the compass. I feel like could be solved by being able to toggle what you track. Overall, I think this would make for a more simplified compass experience, which would be a pretty good addition with helping track objectives, since there is no mini-map system in the game currently. That's not the only thing I want to talk about in terms of tracking with the UI, and the other is being able to see your crafting recipes while not at a crafting station. There is a way to see things you want to craft if you go to a crafting station and pin that recipe, then you can pin it to your task, but other than that, you can't track a recipe if you're just going through the overworld, at least not that I've seen. I've seen in the menus you can see all the items that you have discovered in that skill tree, however you can't pin a specific recipe. I definitely think this would be nice for new players to the game, especially since the crafting could feel a little overwhelming at times, especially with how much there is and how many different skills there are. So I think it would be really nice to be able to get a general idea of what you can craft with the material as you pick it up. Maybe a text block to show some of the things that you can craft, general use case, and then maybe a menu if you have a specific item like iron ore, things you can derive from that, like a crafting tree system, kind of like what's in Minecraft. I think that could be pretty nice to explain the overall crafting system of New World. And those are really my 2 main UI complaints. There are some others, mainly smaller ones. I'll talk about this a little more in the controller guide section, but I do think some of the UI would need to be fixed for that. But overall, I think the UI is sometimes a little cluttered, but overall makes sense once you've spent enough time in the game. But now let's talk about some other quality of life fixes that are not UI related. And one of the biggest things I do want them to change is how enemies work, enemy spawn rates, and enemy behavior. Along with a lot of the balance changes people might want to see to weapons, there are so many PvE changes I kind of want to see when you're going through, especially the early and mid game content. I find that either mobs are either a little too quick to spawn or too slow, and there's not a really good in between. I really noticed this when trying to do some of my first early level 20 missions in First Light, when you have to go to a pirate cove, and I kept getting swarmed by all the enemies there because there's no one else in the area, and everything just kept spawning really quickly. Especially in this mission where I had to take out the 2 mini bosses of the area. This made it a little difficult, especially doing that as a solo player. Usually that area is pretty well populated, given that there are some main and side quests there. However, when I was the only one in the area, I do feel like the enemy spawn rate should have adjusted, being that I'm the only one in the area. I think that would have been pretty nice overall and given it a little more balanced player experience. One other thing with enemies in general, I do feel like the retreating mechanism in the game doesn't really work that well sometimes. Sometimes enemies will follow you way too far from their original spawn, and sometimes some of the bigger boys and some of the bigger bosses can also spawn and retreat really close to their spawn point. This really doesn't make sense to me because there's not really a lot of logic I see in how this works. If New World has ever said anything about how the retreating system works for enemies, let me know in the comments, because I haven't really seen anything, and I definitely think it's something that should overall be adjusted in order to make things a little easier, because overall I think the New World combat is really solid. My only main complaint are some of the enemy spawns and then some of the behavior, especially around whether or not an enemy retreats or not. But those are 3 of the main improvements I've wanted to see with the current state of the game. But now I want to talk about a couple things that I would like to see in the future. The first thing is controller support. Now I did a whole video on this and I'll link it down below and in a card above. And I did a video talking about how I set up my controller to play New World, and did a stream on the channel where I messed around and did some faction quests. However, there are a lot of downsides to using the system with custom Steam controller mappings. Mainly, the UI doesn't support controller well at all, or in any part of the UI that requires any scrolling, and is just a nightmare. Most of the combat and traversal and harvesting, just the things you do moment to moment, were pretty smooth, so I think this could be a win, especially for casual players who might not want to play on mouse and keyboard and just want to focus on PvE. PvP could be done if you could adjust your controller sensitivity a little better than in Steam. Plus, opening up the game to full controller support would hopefully add some accessibility options to people who can't play on mouse and keyboard but might be interested in playing in New World. And then the last thing I want to talk about, probably the most controversial one that's gotten a lot of media coverage, is the character transfers between regions. Originally, New World, they said we could transfer a character between regions. At launch, there were a lot of people who went to a different region in order to find an available server, and we were promised that you could transfer that character to any region that you wanted. But however, in the recent Twitter post, they have said that your transfer will be only in your region, so US West, US East, so on and so forth. I do really hope that they try to implement some cross-region transfer in the future, and I'm surprised they aren't really adding it initially. I do wish if they were still thinking about it, they would have said, we're not going to have this at the initial launch of character transfers, but it's something we'll continue working on, instead of just saying a flat out no. They cited about how the databases in each region are different, so it wouldn't be possible. However, I definitely think this is something that could be overcome with enough time given to find a solution. If you were to, for example, move cross country or to a different city and wanted better ping, you can't really do that now, especially if you want to play with friends in another region and you move to that region, or you just want to have as many characters as possible and want to be able to transfer them freely. I know they have put a limit on the number of character transfers you get for free, which is nice because I feel like not a lot of people will want to transfer a lot of characters or will want to make a lot of characters, at least initially. However, as the game continues to grow and more content needs to be added, I do think it'd be really nice for them to add this feature, especially for people who do move or who do want to play in just in general in a different region with some friends. And yeah, I think that it would be good for them to overall deliver on that promise they said initially when they announced the server transfers would be a thing. But overall, I think I am really enjoying New World. I've put about 50 hours into the actual full release of the game, and I've been enjoying it a lot. I've gotten way further in the main story than I did in the closed beta or the open beta or any of the previously released stuff that they had before the full release. But if you have any thoughts on New World improvements you'd want to see, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm really curious what you're thinking if you are playing the game. And as always, if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos on video games, reviews, and more. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.